reading something and you come across two ideas that just seem to completely contradict each other? Well, today we're jumping into a fascinating one, a real theological puzzle. It's a paradox that asks, how can one part of the Bible say that none are righteous, while another part holds up a man named Abel as being, well, righteous? Let's unpack this together.
So this is it. This is the central question for our little investigation today. If there's this universal rule, this declaration that none are righteous, how do we explain Abel? It really feels like a direct contradiction, right? So let's start digging into the evidence.
All right, to get to the bottom of this, we're going to approach it kind of like detectives. And our first piece of evidence is this really powerful, sweeping declaration from the Apostle Paul about, the fundamental state of all humanity. I mean, listen to that. There is none righteous, no, not one. Paul, quoting from the Psalms here in Romans, is not mincing words. It's not ambiguous. This is an absolute, across-the-board statement. There are no exceptions, no asterisks, no fine print. Okay, so if that's the universal state of things, what does that actually mean for the things we do? Specifically, how does this internal unrighteousness affect our attempts to do things that please God, like making a sacrifice? And that leads us to a pretty clear, if tough, consequence. Proverbs tells us, the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord. So the logic seems pretty simple, right? If no one is righteous, then by that definition, everyone falls into the wicked category, and therefore, no one's sacrifice should be accepted. But here's the twist. This is where our detective story takes a sharp turn, because the case of Abel seems to fly in the face of everything we've just laid out. This is the heart of the paradox. So let's just put it side by side. On one hand, you have Paul's absolute statement, none righteous. And on the other, you have this specific commendation of Abel, calling him righteous. I mean, how can both of these things possibly be true in the same breath? And if we go back to the original story in Genesis, the mystery just gets deeper. It says God had respect for Abel and for his offering. That's a positive response. It's the exact opposite of an abomination. So if Abel is unrighteous like everyone else, his sacrifice should have been rejected. But it wasn't. So let's just take stock. We have a universal rule. Nobody is righteous. And then we have this glaring exception, Abel, a guy who is called righteous and whose offering is totally accepted. So what gives? How on earth do we resolve this puzzle? But like any good mystery, there's always one breakthrough clue. And in this case, it comes from a later writer looking back on Abel's story and giving us the one piece of information we need to unlock the whole thing. The entire solution, the whole thing, it hinges on just two words that completely reframe the entire situation. The answer, it turns out, was hiding in plain sight all along. And here it is, from Hebrews chapter 11. By faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice. That's it. That's the game changer. It wasn't about Abel being an inherently good person, and it wasn't even about the quality of his lamb. The one thing that made his offering acceptable was faith. So now, with this key, we can finally put all the pieces together. That little phrase, by faith, is what allows us to connect all the dots and solve the paradox without having to throw out any of the evidence. And this brings us to this huge concept, righteousness by faith. It's not about being righteous on your own merits. Instead, it's about being given the status of righteous because you performed an action that was driven by faith, and God accepted it. Okay, so let's walk through the logic one last time. Step 1, the rule stands. Paul was right. By nature, none are righteous. Step 2, the consequence also stands. Normally, an offering would be an abomination. Step 3, Abel introduces a new variable into the equation. He acts by faith. And step 4, that faith changes the outcome. His offering is accepted because of his faith, and as a result, he is commended as righteous. And just like that, the paradox is solved. So really, the whole thing boils down to this crucial distinction. There's inherent righteousness, being good in and of yourself, which Paul says no one has. And then there's commended righteousness, a status that God gives you in response to your faith. Abel fits perfectly into that second category. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it? If Abel's action was only made valuable and acceptable because of his faith, what does that teach us about the relationship between what we believe and what we do? It's a deep one, and definitely something worth pondering.